Good morning to those of you who are also in the East Coast, and good afternoon, evening to those of you who might be tuning in from elsewhere. I am here today with Bryan and Erin, and we are chatting all things DevRel. So you picked a good day to tune in. As always, if you have any questions, any thoughts, ideas, things you want us to talk about, throw them in the chat. Otherwise, let me give my wonderful guests a chance to introduce themselves, because they'll do a much better job of it than I will. So, Bryan, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Bryan Robinson. You might know me as B-Rob over there. Yeah, I'm very online. Been doing development and design for a long time, been doing DevRel for a little while, and been creating content for a while, too. That's the smallest I can say, but I could go on and on, so I won't.
I think I'm going to have to start adding very online to my own description as well.
It's what we do, isn't it?
Unfortunately accurate.
Is that unfortunate or is that very fortunate? Because like the internet has led me to both of you. I only know that Bryan is a real human. I actually don't know if you're real. You might just be only online, Kathryn. We've never met in person.
Incredibly complicated AI.
Well done on the programmer, right?
Right, they killed it. Erin, why don't you go ahead and give us the 101 on you?
Yeah, I'm a fellow very online human. I'm Erin Mikail Staples. You can find me probably far too online. I am a technical community builder, former journalist and content creator, and someone looking for their next adventure.
Also, spoiler alert, the reason that Erin and I sometimes appear together, not just because we just finished working together, but also because we're former journalist people in the tech world, in the DevRel and community world. As it turns out, we both have that background. So exciting times ahead.
Yeah, exciting similar rants. And exciting similar, you can see everybody, apologies. My cat is like totally having his way with the camera. So we are totally live. We're totally here, very live, very real. Very technical glitches are here in person.
This is a fair question because the Code It Live team we're like at the end of crazy conference season. We've been in and out a lot. There's been a lot of reruns on Code It Live recently. But this one, you're getting 100% authentic mishaps, including me saying 100%.
That totally means that you can ask questions too. So if you do have any questions, I love questions. I don't know about Erin, but I love questions.
We joke often that Bryan and I have streamed together for a job and not also for funsies. We made an 11D site last week, but we pride ourselves in our banter per minute. So BPM, it's a really important metric. I hope that every DevRel team is taking notes right now, or dev advocacy team.
The metric is the metric for your DevRel team.
The metric to keep your eyes on for the future is banter per minute. We might go over that later today. We might not, but I think Kathryn, you invited us to talk DevRel, dev advocacy, dev technical communities, file, insert job title here. So I'll kind of defer to you.
Oh, shucks. No, I like it. I'm here to contribute to the banter per minute. So, but part of what we wanted to do today was kind of talk a little bit about what DevRel actually is. It's weirdly one of the really common questions that we get on Code It Live, because most of the folks that host various Code It Live shows, we're all part of the DevRel team at Kendo. And we hear a lot of questions just about what is that? What does that mean? What's involved in DevRel? Also some questions on like, how can I get into DevRel? I'm interested in transitioning my career from software engineering or individual contributor kind of stuff into developer relations, and how the heck do you do that? And I weirdly am patently unqualified to answer the how do you do that question. I was very lucky to basically get recruited. I got an email from someone at Progress. They proposed a job that sounded incredible and also a little bit fake to me, and it turned out to be real and amazing. But I didn't kind of go through the steps of well, what is this? And maybe I'm interested in doing this, and kind of angling my career in that way with as much intention as some other folks did. It just kind of fell into my lap, and I consider myself very lucky. But also unqualified to answer your questions on how to get into it. So maybe let's start with there. What is DevRel?
Okay.
Yeah,
What is
no, go
DevRel first?
ahead.
But
Yeah.
I've got a question for you about how you ended up getting recruited to do DevRel, not having sought.
Mhm.
Yeah,
We can get into that later, though. It sounds like we should probably enter what is DevRel first.
let's start there. Yeah, just for folks that might not be super into it, and I promise I will walk you through my story in probably more detail than you actually want later.
So I'll start maybe a little bit and say DevRel is seen as a very, very new thing, although it is in the grand scheme of like lawyer as a profession, it is incredibly new. But it has been around for a little while. It's been around since like the 80s. Like I'm pretty sure like some of the early technical companies had, I think we called them, we were talking pre-stream about like the evangelist role. They had technical evangelists at Microsoft in the 90s. And I actually did some research for a presentation I gave a while ago. And if you're familiar with the concept of user groups as a thing, like local groups of people that get together because they use a technology. They've been around since like the 60s. There was an IBM mainframe user group in one of the small suburbs of San Francisco in the 60s. And that's where user groups dated back to. So like that almost could be seen as like the start of like developer relations. But really what it amounts to, in my opinion, and Erin, I know has some strong opinions as well, is around the idea of educating for, providing value to, and seeking to build community around technical communities, around products, code. I think we have it in our notes. I'll let Erin talk about, like Mary Thengvall has some stuff around code, content, and community as pillars of DevRel. But basically, in my experience, it has been providing education and as much value for the people that are circling a product as possible. And then that brings value to whatever company you're doing DevRel for, as a very simplistic way of saying it.
Yeah, and I'm actually pulling up the tweet that Mary has published about that. But I think to kind of add into this, and one of the things I would add is like we, especially in technical communities, and the reason why it is a technical community function is I think of all those companies we in the early 2000s to kind of take us on a journey in the tech history world. API was in many cases is the product that you're selling. So I think of, Stripe is often commonly referenced as the gold standard, or kind of the people who have really pioneered this way forward of building an API as a product. And for many other organizations, you pay those premium features are to use the API and are to use those functions. The function of developer relations, or insert very myriad of titles here, is to kind of not only supplement the API, but make sure that it's working in a way that it should be working. Is it doing the job that it needs to do? And is it continuing to provide benefit to an organization? Now, I think there's a fun little tangent, because there's also another discussion we can get into of developer relations and community, and do they overlap? Are they overlapping? Are they similar? Are they different? And how do they function within different organizations? And I think we can put that we'll circle back to that one and put a pin in it for later. But that is definitely a rabbit hole that is worth discussing, and I think is important to discuss, because we don't often imagine or think about how does developer relations and community teams work together, and should they? And that varies very differently depending on the organization and the type of developer relations or community people that you're working with. So I would like to say that there's one right answer that will fit everybody, but there's
no.
all we're going to learn today is that we have less right answers than wrong.
It's a developer audience today. Therefore, the answer, it depends, is the correct answer to everything.
It is a valid answer. Yeah. It does feel like a cop-out sometimes when I'm talking about DevRel to be like, it really depends. Or like someone asked me once, like, what's your day-to-day look like? And I was like, oh, it depends. Like,
like on the recruiting train right now, and like all like the interviewing process, like people ask like, what's your day-to-day? Or, what has your day-to-day been at company X, company Y? I'm like, well, it depended month to month, really, like what our focus was and what we were doing. There were some things that were the same all along the way, but every month was different.
Mm-hmm.
I think that every month in my career has probably been, I also probably chose a career path. Like before I stepped into the community and DevRel world, I was doing like product UX research and very people-y function roles, and then journalism. So I don't really know that I I don't know what it's like to have a job that you do a similar thing every day. And I think it's a very interesting thing that we talk on, but kind of to that point of like, it really comes down to, and I know Bryan and I are both on the quest for our next role right now, but the important thing to acknowledge is like, I'm pretty upfront in the process. What do you want? What do you think that you need? And what is important to you in this process? And why is that important? And what are the outcomes that you expect from hiring this individual? That's a question I've definitely been
Big time.
really leaning into in this recruiting process and this interviewing process is what outcomes do you want to see within 3 months, 9 months, a year by hiring me? And then I can definitely say, oh, you want someone who does X, Y, Z? I love that. That's not up my alley, and I can defer the conversation. However, there's also times that I'm like, holy cow, you just listed off 17 job description, and that's actually a 17-person team and not just a 1-person team.
Yep.
And let me
you see that most often
realistically-
with those 1-person teams too, right? It's like we want all these things out of our DevRel. Yes,
Yeah.
in 3 years when we built our team, you'll absolutely get those things. Right now, it's just me. You'll get 4 of them.
Yeah.
Right, but
And-
you always see that like kind of cushion in that, like you'll have full whatever to do whatever you want. You'll be building the
Will
team
you?
from the ground up. Like I always laugh at the language that gets used in these job
Are
descriptions.
you a rock star looking to join our multivariate family that is
Red
skilled
flag,
in a
red
bajillion?
flag.
Yeah, it's like, join Rockstar in our multivariate family looking to, and I'm like, ooh.
It
I think
reminds me of when I was like house shopping, when I was house hunting, trying to buy a house, and you see all this, you learn. It's like, oh, cozy. I don't know.
Small.
You know, quaint.
Small.
Like, there's this language that gets used in an attempt to like make, frankly, some difficult situations sound more palatable. And sometimes it's okay. Like no job is going to be perfect. No house is going to be perfect. You make compromises and you prioritize what's important to you. But it feels hard when you feel like you have to cut through some of this language as well sometimes.
It's the age-old interview thing too, right? Like, what are your weaknesses? Well, I'd say my weakness is that I care too much, I work too hard, and I spend too many hours thinking about how the company could be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
I'm just like upfront these days. It's like, I come with an added bonus of terrible jokes. I do test out my comedy sets in person on a stream. And I'm sometimes mix up my metaphors.
Also, metaphors per minute is a good DevRel metric
Yeah.
as well.
But I think, and I love this question about what are the parts of DevRel you like the most. I think in order to better understand that, I think we probably have to outline all the different things that we can do, or like different things of DevRel that are out there. So we wrote a quick list of job titles, and I'll drop some in the chat. I'm just going to drop the list because I feel like it's also not a complete list, but we can kind of go.
Yeah. I would love us to like start the talk about everything that we do by maybe listing like what we like the most so we answer this question, and then also maybe just a little reality check of what parts of the job we like the least.
Sure. So I can start with that, right?
Yeah.
So I absolutely adore, and that's actually not on this list now that I'm like rethinking the list. I love developer education. I absolutely, it is my favorite thing to do in whatever shape that takes. So sometimes that takes writing a blog post, sometimes that is a video, sometimes that is a presentation. But if it allows me to communicate a technical concept to an audience that will then go use that concept, again, product, not product. I used to do this about CSS. Like I mean, technically like UI, right? There's
Right.
CSS products out there, and there's products that do this kind of thing, but like no one's out there saying like use the web platform CSS and make money. No, it's like I just enjoy it. But like the idea of creating content that then helps somebody do something is huge for me. It's what I enjoy the most about anything in DevRel, and probably what I enjoy the least is company social media. I think I like social, and I'm on Twitter, and I post to Twitter, whether that's good stuff, bad stuff, whatever it is. But doing company social media is
like posting under the name of the company.
yeah, and it's like a
That's-
tightrope
Ooh.
balance too. Like especially like either early stage or late stage, it doesn't matter. It's always a tightrope of like getting the language right and speaking authentically to the developer audience while also maintaining business tone. And no, I'll post on my personal and you can retweet it. Thanks.
Yeah. I was going to say, I find that so interesting because since we're talking about the different roles and like expectations, I would not have considered that part of DevRel. We have a social media team that handles that. We work closely with them. They'll amplify from us. Sometimes they'll make suggestions and kind of say like, hey, we would really love it if you could post some promos for this that's coming up or this event. But ultimately, our social team has been very explicit that they're like, nope, you have your socials. We have our socials. You can do this job without a Twitter at all, although you would probably struggle. But we have people on our DevRel team that are more or less active on Twitter and more or less active in other platforms that I don't touch, like Reddit.
So, no, thank you. Yeah.
I also think that's an interesting point because I have been asked, and I have been asked even in this interviewing process of how open are you to using your personal Twitter connections and your personal LinkedIn connections to benefit the company? And that is something I have a very hard time with. And I've been asked that point blank in this early process. And it's like, I'm like, if I do think it is a genuine fit, and I do think that it is a genuine mutual beneficial, like thing that like we all can agree to, we all can be excited about, great. I would be more than happy to make an introduction, but like, you don't need to ask me for an introduction.
Yeah.
However, if you are like recently I was asked like, oh, can you go get sponsorships from your followers?
Probably not.
Probably not. Like that makes me feel a little gross and icky inside. And like, these are also because I believe very genuinely about what I do. And I believe, I'm very fortunate. Like those, I don't like to think of them as a follower, but they're also friends. Like many times I do reach out and I do like to chat with people personally.
Yeah. No, we've kind of, it's interesting. We've navigated some of that as well because I'll write a lot of content for the Telerik blogs, right? And some of that is generic engineering content, and some of that is very specific about Kendo UI and how you can best use it, and frankly, why I think it's great. Like it's part of my job. And we've had some questions about cross-posting those onto like Dev2 or onto Reddit or other blogging platforms. And sometimes I'm like, totally, like this feels like a piece of content that is beneficial to everyone. I would love to cross-post it over to Dev2 under my name. But if it's something that's really like 10 reasons why Kendo is great, then
out of curiosity, like when you repost it over to Dev.2, are you reposting under like a Kendo
no,
org?
My account.
Oh.
Yeah.
There's organizations in Dev2. That's like the reason that I used to use
right.
like you make the organization and then you show the authorship and that's fine, but like
we do post there, but I had built up a follower account over there before I started at Kendo. And so sometimes it's a question of like, this will get a little bit more traffic. Like there's likely to be more eyes on it if you post it under your account than if we do under the Kendo account. Where do you draw the line?
Things that are 500 things that I don't like about developer relations is navigating the algorithms, which is the icky part that is like absolutely hard for me because it's like, oh, do I post it from my personal? Do I post it from my work account? Do I post it on? I am active on Reddit. But like my Reddit is 97% skincare subreddits and Animal Crossing and keyboard hacking and Raspberry Pi Internet of Things random maker things. So it's really not like, I'm sorry, my Reddit followers are not really going to be helpful for 97%, maybe that 3% that's interested in that like IoT stuff, but like we're also doing very different, quirky things that most people don't care about. But yeah, the algorithm game and like who does what is very hard.
I liked this line that Olasoy Monk put in the chat, which great name, by the way. That's generally what I kind of try to go by is like, is this generally beneficial to the audience that I'm posting it for, or does it feel too specific to the audience of like users for our product? And if it feels product specific, I like to keep it to more product specific like channels. We've got the Kendo blog, we've got the Kendo social media, we've got great places for people that are looking specifically for Kendo stuff. But if it's more, I'm happy to post things that are general engineering. Every now and again I'll amplify Kendo stuff, but ultimately my accounts are my accounts for me, Kathryn Grayson, not Kathryn Grayson the brand.
So real fast, one thing that Ola also said up higher was that they've been told by folks looking for DevRel work, they've been asked during interviews how many followers they have, and the response was ugh, right? And that's totally but here's the thing that like this is a bigger rant for DevRel in general. And community also, and I'm sorry, there's soapboxes, and honestly, we haven't actually fully heard from Erin like favorite parts of doing this work. But important rant that we can bookmark for later maybe is the count is not the important part, right? And like I would say this for everything, whether that's viewership on like a video or any of the big number goes up metrics, that's not important. I can make my follower account jump. I can pay money and make that happen. I can make viewership on a tweet or a video go up. I can pay to make that happen. The key is the value that either the person who saw it got out of it, or the value that we brought into the company based on that. Viewership isn't that value either way. And so for follower count, it's not about the number of people following, but when I go out and start a conversation, whether that's on Twitter with following or wherever it is, having a great conversation with chat on Twitch, do people talk back? And am I having conversations, or am I shouting into the blackness of the void? Right. And I think in marketing teams, and I'm not gonna hate on marketing too much because it is like 60% of where DevRel lives, but like marketing teams look for a big number goes up. When in reality, if I've got 100 people that follow me and they interact or do what I ask them to 95% of the time, is that better than having 1 million and having them do what I want 0.01% of the time? I mean, 1 million's a lot, so maybe it evens out. But like 100 people that I get 95 to do something, that's huge. That's amazing. Even if that something is a micro engagement, like just saying hi and tell me how their day is going. That's huge. Versus like a big corporate, I don't know. Like I think that anything with viewership or audience related, and I think again, hi Ola, you're just providing all sorts of stuff in there, right? Quality over quantity is the huge thing, right? And if it's 100 people versus 1,000 people, it's no contest. The 100 people with high engagement will win over the 1,000 people with no engagement every time.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you in the chat have ever tried to get the internet as a general thing to do something. It's hard. That's an uphill battle, y'all.
And the times that it does happen, you're 9 times out of 10 like you can't. You're like, how do I recreate? No. However, when you do have it, it's like I think the other skill that you have to leverage is there is a skill of I have captured attention. Now what? Where do I point it to? Yeah. How do I build off of this? How do I lean into this? How do I, continue to leverage this? Like one of the biggest highlights I've had in my career is I got to run an event series about a virtual mall in Excel Google Sheets, which was like a very fun, I keep telling people about this and they're like, but you really got to, and I was like, yes, it was a total highlight. I had a whole event series, but the original tweet that popped it off was a total accident. I have no idea what caused it. Yeah. It just spiked and it took off on the internet, which was such one of those like magical like internet experiences. But again, I came from a team that empowered me to make a decision, act on it, experiment, be open to failure, show that I can have a budget. Like I had a budget, but I was equally responsible for making sure that got revenue. Like I was equally responsible for that, showing that I could get relevant voices discussing something out of a Google spreadsheet mall.
Discussing is such a key word with everything that we do. Everything DevRel related, discussion is the key. Again, like engagement is awesome, but like discussion and having more than like 2 words said back and forth to people. And again, I know I shocked Erin earlier about talking about nuance, right? The more nuance we somehow encourage, the better the internet is. So maybe as DevRel, we can make the internet a better place too. Probably not, but maybe.
You're actually giving me a perfect segue for the thing that I love most about this space. So thank you for that. We're mirrored, so I'm like, gotta point out this way. Yeah. But like, thanks, Bryan. But the thing that I originally fell in love with journalism, and we're going to take a bit of journalism theory now. We had philosophy from Bryan. We'll get journalism theory from Erin today. The thing I love about DevRel and technical community building and goes back to what I loved and was originally drawn about with journalism. And the power of journalism is there is a, segment of journalism theory that says the role of journalism plays in society is to start conversations that matter, that uphold the truth and the values in a public. And if we just move that to the DevRel sector, all we're doing in DevRel or technical community building or developer education is starting conversations that matter to an organization, to a group of individuals, to a group of creators, to a group of people who are building to do things better. And so my introduction into the DevRel world and even the technical community world was totally on accident. That goofy virtual mall thing that I made was actually my introduction. So I was a product manager when I launched that. And then they were like, you're now the head of community because you did this thing and you were running the Discord that had beta feedback. And by the way, you still also need to be a product manager because we're a startup and we have no budget for 2 roles and you're not getting a pay raise. So yay.
Good luck.
All that being said, yeah, it was instantly like how to do community was like first thing I Googled. And reading these posts, and like Mary Thingvall is one woman that I like really looked up to. And, the Nadia Iqbal book was like another one of the building and open source was another really great resource for me to learn. And the reason that I was very excited about these is because it was something that I had been doing my entire career. And I just didn't know there was a job title for it. And I've been doing this since I was a teen. Like I was a Sims 2 content creator making custom content and geocaching.com forum person. And I ran fan blogs on Tumblr. I still run fan blogs on Tumblr.
Very online.
Very online. And so to much of my parents' dismay. But that education conversation part, like the sparking conversation is what I love most about being in this industry, being in this space. I'm a kindred spirit with Bryan, if you couldn't pick that up. The education part is very near and dear to my heart, and working with people who do. I think the coolest thing about being on that technical side is you're usually working with the people who are using your product, building on top of your product, writing tutorials. They're doing something. You're working directly with the people who are making, and I absolutely love that. The thing I don't like, wonderful rush of nostalgia. Hey, I'm creating Sims 4 custom content this weekend and designed and uploaded Jurassic Park World templates online. Hit me up. Way too online these days. But, the thing I don't like is some of the ambiguity. And that I think is a very hard thing is like when we don't know what we want or we don't know what we need, I think it becomes very difficult, or what the goals are. That becomes very difficult for me because it's like you lose the why. You lose the original thing that I love about this industry, which is empowering discussions with purpose. If you don't have a strong why, you've now lost that purpose behind of what you're doing, and it gets a little wonky out there. And so I think that's what's really frustrating. The other thing that's really frustrating, and I go back to horror stories of the world, is when numbers become your only metric. And I joke about banter per minute and engagement and conversations had. And the thing that's frustrating is I once worked for an open source community, and I knew I needed to leave like a month later because they pointed Facebook ads to a Discord. And you can just imagine the quality of conversations that went down there. They put $1,500 into a Discord because it wasn't growing fast enough. And I was like, yeah, right. And this was like, oh my goodness. It was like, and this hyper fixation on numbers is like, don't get me wrong. I think we do need numbers and we do need metrics and we do need value, but is growth and is scaling the only value we can bring? What about growth of experience? What about growth in conversation? What about depth of conversation? Like, so that's my loves and hates.
The dichotomy of growth versus strength too. Like strength of community is a much better metric and a much better thing to be thinking about than the numeric growth of the community. Because again, you can buy your way into big numbers. And like, I think every metric, to bring my philosophy degree in, right? Every metric has a slippery slope to it. Every single one. Because if you focus solely on the metric, you can find ways to make the metric happen. You can find ways to make the big number go up. Like that's not the authentic reason why the metric was created. But if I have to prove my worth by making that number go up, that means I need to do it at all costs. And as soon as at all costs comes in, we have issues. And so like, if we can figure out how to make community strength and the bonds within the community, right? Like if I like to use an example from like previous employment, like we had a Slack community. And it was a decent sized, thriving Slack community. Lots of good conversations would happen. We started up a streaming initiative. We came onto Twitch. Some people from our Slack community had similar or the same usernames in Twitch. Super cool. And they would carry conversations over. They would have started a conversation over in Slack, and during a stream, they'd be like, oh, this ties into that thing that we were talking about in Slack. And like they'd be like, oh, you're so-and-so from Slack. You got a different username, but now I know who you are. And like forging those authentic bonds and like seeing it cross over from channel to channel, for lack of a better word, like that is community strength. That is a set of people who will hang out regardless of whether or not you as a company are in the conversation. Because like I can drive engagement by like really like pushing like daily conversations and making these like things happen where I get like maybe 5 people saying yes or something like that, and I can say, all right, I hit my engagement number. I had 5 people reply to my comment, to my tweet, to my Slack post, whatever it is. But how do we measure people who discussed things not related to the product within a product channel, and that's organic? Like, again, like I believe in DevRel, one of the things that we're responsible for is creating spaces within which people can have conversations. And that oftentimes means we're making the spaces, and that's fine. Like, it's fine to like put a conversational starter out and have people respond. Nothing wrong with that. But like, if somebody randomly asks a question and they get like 10 responses to it, and it's just about a random topic related in some, like, oh, I'm in the Jamstack community and you asked me about this Next.js thing that is completely different from anything that's being said, and I got like 8 responses and no one from the company appeared, that's pretty darn cool. Like, I dig that. And that is a strong community versus when I ask a question as a product person and get like 2 responses, or only get responses and only get conversation when I push something out, or it can be a very transactional community and only have conversations that happen when somebody needs product help. That's fine. And that's important. We should be taking care of our community, but it becomes a very transactional community at that point. That's a support function, and that's fine. But like, is that a strong community, or is it just a growth community or just a support community? And again, I say just not as a derogatory, but as it serves a very specific function.
I was gonna say it just serves a different purpose, right? Because that's from the same thing. We've got a set of forums that are exclusively support specific for people to post questions, and they'll get replies either from the community or from an actual support tech with Kendo. But that's not the same kind of conversation that we get on the Code It Live channel. And we've got folks that I see show up in the chat over and over again and have conversations and engage with us. And they always pop in and say hi. And it's like, that's different than the support forums. And both are valuable in exceedingly different ways.
Yeah.
The sign, and like it's a personal metric I've used throughout my career, especially since joining this, is a sign that I am doing my job well, and a sign that I am doing things in a way that matters and creates ongoing impact is the personal community that you interact with. How do they react when something changes? So unfortunately, like many of you have heard, Bryan and I did lose our jobs last week, or 2 weeks ago now. Week and a half. So
time flies.
Time flies when you're fun employed. But on that Real Talk notice, I had multiple people reach out, not only from this last job, but the job before that, and the job before that. And they said, oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I had someone reach out and they were like, I remember when you were here and you did this. How can I help? And I'm like,
Aw.
holy, and it's like this like very flattering, like, oh my goodness, gonna cry up and everything.
Yeah.
Emmett Naughton, if you're watching this, I feel you. I love you. You've been my OG since day one when I was like literally messaging you going, I'm the head of community and I have no idea what I'm doing. And he was just like, one day at a time, you got this. And I think those are very empowering metrics, but I think that's also a very valuable conversation that you can continue to bring. And that's a personal metric I use of like, am I actually getting to know the people that I'm working with or working alongside or building with? Can I like continue to interact with them? How am I helping them? Not just in a gross, icky transactional way. Like we've all been there yelling at our support tickets or, you know, screaming at a support forum. And support is important. It's one thing. And I think it's also support and community go so hand in hand, but also they are two different functions and they need to be treated as such.
Yes.
I have I feel like there's a potential for a segue here real fast, but I have a question for chat because I want to make sure like I'm targeting talking to the people right here, but like I'm assuming that most of chat right now is not in DevRel. Maybe it is. So I'm curious, how many people are engineers? How many people are DevRel? How many people are outside of any of that? And we're interested in coming to this stream to see how to get into DevRel. So I feel like there's a conversation to be had with Erin mentioning the fact that we are both unemployed and we are both seeking, and how that seeking looks different for us versus some other people who also have unfortunately been laid off in different parts of the technical industry who, because of our jobs, we're having maybe don't want to jinx anything, right? A much easier time than than they might. And how, even if you aren't interested in getting into DevRel, how DevRel-like activities can help you further your career as well.
Mark,
yeah, and I definitely want to talk about getting into DevRel, because the other thing, as much as I love our live chat, we also get a fair few people that watch later videos on demand. So I want to make sure that we're touching on this topic because I think it is an important one.
So I just had to give this speech because again, on the job hunt, people are like, how did you get into DevRel? So
I'm also sorry to interject one moment, Bryan, but like I have one thing I'm also even curious, like Bryan and I know that you and I have chatted about this, but I'm also curious because we're going for slightly different roles. So how does it differentiate between the two of us?
Yeah, it's
a very good thing. If you want to bring us on as a
roles, it's fine.
Actually, no. I'm the dream is like, how do we get the two of us to keep bantering together? We're great at this. Keep going. High five.
There we go.
Oh, that was impressive.
Can we get a screenshot of that? Am I gonna pause things?
Yeah, hold on, do it.
Oh, but see my hands here. Oh, anyway. So
I hope someone got a screenshot.
So yeah, definitely like there's lots of similarities, but like definitely some differences in there. But one thing, so I do see like there's an engineer, marketing, all sorts of stuff. But so my trajectory, right, in tech in general, I was actually on I can't think of her actual name now, Lola Coding. She was at Vonage for a little bit, but she runs the We Belong Here podcast. Lauren, I can't think of her last name right now. The We Belong Here podcast. And I have a degree in philosophy. I'm not a computer science person. I have a degree in philosophy, and out of college, I went into journalism and was a copy editor. Very not technical. Just had dreams of an internet utopia in which I was running the newspaper's online cool publication stuff. Anyway, I did that for a while, blah, blah, blah. But I was at an agency and I met a guy that ran the PHP user group in Memphis. And I was like, you know what? There's no front end user group. There's no design user group. These things don't exist. Yeah, Lauren is awesome. Lola Codes. There it is. Perfect.
Yep.
But yeah, so I was doing that. I was like, okay, cool. And I happened to get like my first speaking engagement, and I was terrified, and it was on a topic that I kind of knew and I probably shouldn't have been presenting on. And it was like 5 people, but at that little mini conference, it was like 100 people in Memphis. Joe, my colleague, introduced me to Eric, who ended up co-hosting the Memphis Web Workers with me for 6 years until he moved. And I ran it for another year until I moved. But like, I created this community And it became one of the more popular communities in Memphis because it was this kind of like bigger, broader thing than just a PHP or a Python or a Ruby user group. It kind of hit all these different topics. And so that was very organic, but that wasn't me seeking a DevRel role. I was relatively content at the agency that I was working at. I ended up managing a team there. It was great. And the like owners are still friends of mine to this day. But I did that and I liked it. It forced me to learn to present, like, because when you run a community
That's
or you run a meetup and you don't get somebody to speak that month, the meetup happens anyway. So you speak. And so on the fly, like day of, 2 days before, I was making presentations for when I hadn't found somebody. And I learned how to do that on the fly. And that was super entertaining. And then I started writing content on my own blog, got published on CSS Tricks for a CSS Grid article, saw my SEO spike and said, hey, this is something. And like, I then like started my own company to try to make it happen. I want to be the next West boss. Obviously that didn't happen. It is what
I'd
it
work
is.
for you.
It's a high bar.
Yeah,
I can work for you. I'll still subscribe to the stream. It's great for you. I don't have dreams of being a founder, so you got it. Yeah. I believe in you.
Well, and I had like fail cases, right? My fail case was like, if I'm not the next West boss, I will find a company that wants to pay me to do this. And that's what I did. And that's kind of like, I started being a professional DevRel after that. I called myself a free agent DevRel before that. But my path, right, was doing production development design on the side, just wanting a community of people that were of somewhat a like mind and could talk and educate me and educate them, write content, create content. I'm a DevRel. And like, I think there's a progression to that, but like the other side to that, coming from like layoff world, because in tech in general, you might see a layoff, even if you're not in DevRel, in the current macroeconomic times.
It's pretty common. I mean, even I think just generally in tech as an industry.
So, yeah, I was going to say,
when times
if you're in startups,
good.
and even in times are good, this is my second one.
It is just, I think you could probably talk to every single person in tech. And they've gone through a layoff at some point in their career.
I think a huge thing though, right, is when like so two things. A, to actually loop my story back in, because that was like a 5-minute aside about nothing. You're welcome. But like to loop back in, like we did a super user group. There was all the family, the mafia family for the Memtech community, put together like twice a year. All the user groups canceled theirs and focused into one. And one of the elder statesmen of the Memtech community gave a presentation on like why to be a part of this community. And it was like, one of the things was, when you're looking for a job, it's amazing to have a community at your back. That's not the reason to join the community. Like, you don't join the community because it's going to get you a job, but when you need a job, the community will hustle for you and help you get that job. So that's one thing. But the other side is, if you start creating content, and it can be bad, and it's okay to be bad, because it will be bad. Because I look back at stuff I have and it's still public. Go back and find like the first articles on my blog. They're terrible. And they're still there. Because why hide it? But if you create content and form up and find communities to be a part of in an organic way, when those layoffs happen, you basically have a portfolio built based on your content. And you have a network, which is a terrible thing to say. You build relationships, you don't build a network, but when you build relationships, you get one.
Yeah.
And so like, we've seen in the past few months tons of layoffs around DevRel. Luckily, also some companies realize that DevRel is super important, so lots of hiring. But people put out the bat signal, and they're like, "Hey, just got laid off." You can go on Twitter and find mine and Erin. We put out the bat signal, and because we've done that work, both personally and professionally, we're in a much better state to have those conversations, to showcase value, and to be connected at a whole bunch of different companies. Whereas other people who are perhaps just like doing the production work and not hustling to grow that, which I respect, work-life balance, super important, don't. And it's a little bit harder. It's harder to find that at a company that maybe you really want to work for, and then you have to take a job for money. And that's fine. And you need to, because pay your bills.
Yeah.
But it's harder to find the ideal when you don't have this network that you didn't get by networking. Rant.
Yeah. And I think that's a very important point, but I think there's also like a couple of things that I've noticed throughout this journey and getting into developer relations is one thing I'm very fortunate is we don't just like build community for funsies, Bryan. You and I, we spent up an out of orbit Discord for everybody who was laid off. Unfortunately, we
Erin did. I joined.
I was like, I need a Discord. I need an audio rant right now. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to rant? Bryan is no longer a Slack message away. Let's change this. It was like,
it's not like you weren't also texting me day of. It's fine.
It's fine. Yeah, it's fine.
It's different. It's different.
It's different. I definitely cracked a joke during layoff day. I was like, oh, you gotta go because you gotta go lay off Bryan right after this. It was sending love to our poor HR woman who had to laugh at me just going, you're cracking jokes right now. On brand, Erin.
I got my hair cut right before it, not knowing, and she was like, oh, your hair looks great. I'm like, it's my layoff hair. It's my job hunting hair. It's important.
I'm glad that we both had morbid humor in this moment because I was very much on the can't run over, the rest of the team has to get laid off. And she was just like, Erin.
It's all you can do in that moment.
Yep.
Right? Like
that's all you can do. But anywho, we spun up this Discord. It's all of us just kind of who are laid off. And one thing I am very, honored to know you, Bryan, obviously, but like the thing that's like been really amazing is like seeing people in this group really be like, oh my goodness, you did this great work. Let me introduce you to, or we've been giving resume reviews to one another. We've been providing portfolio insights. We have been doing a lot of that stuff, which actually helps me. And I think, my career, like I mentioned earlier, I got into this industry on a complete accident, but didn't realize it was something I had been doing all along. I was a speech and debate nerd. Let's pretend to be surprised. I was a state champion in high school in speech and debate. Let's go. Nerd alert here. But the public speaking and that side of things was always very natural. I actually ran a podcast before I got my first community job. And it was a comedy podcast. And I really enjoyed that side of things. And learning that you can do this and get paid was like, yeah. I was like, this is super cool. I was like, I can be forever learning about something, whether it's learning on an API or learning on different things or learning on all of this stuff. I can nerd out on the internet with friends and keep making things. I like public speaking. I'm one of the weirdos who does enjoy it.
I think you're preaching to the choir when you're talking to 200 girls.
I know. I'm like, but it's very interesting to be like, I had no idea this was even a job. Like, when you're doing the career testing, I was
neither.
like, I, got into my like early job career. Like, Erin, I wanted to be a lobbyist for nonprofit organizations.
I could see that too, to be honest.
Yeah. I was like, I think I want to be a city council person or a political reporter was my like career options in high school. And then I swerved hard. And
life
happened. But I think like I now have been in the space for about, 4 years or whatever. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, especially on this job hunt now, is I have been very good, again, content creation, building in public, sharing what I know. There is some very cringy content out there. My former alma mater and my undergrad actually still publishes. In my journalism school, they had us create advertisements for the journalism school. And there's a very cringy YouTube video that's still they occasionally promote.
I've seen it.
It's very bad. It is very cringy. It is like me as Lizzie McGuire-ish person running the halls. It is very bad. It's cringe. They still promote it. It's cringe. But that all being said, the thing that I'm noticing in my part is I am looking to switch into more, I was on the community side of things and have been on the product community side of things, but I am now looking to move closer towards the technical side of things and embracing more DevRel. But a lot of the API work I had been doing or hacking on things, I haven't documented. Or I just like, when I was at Orbit, I was like, oh, it's going to take 30 seconds. I'm just going to do this doc and edit it. But you don't write your name on a doc update. You don't be like, hey, I discovered this is out of date. I just like did it. And so that's been the thing that I've been learning in my part is like, as I'm leaning to work towards developers more specifically, it's been going back and showcasing like, I do have a technical background. I am self-taught. And I joke because my intro to development actually started with email templates, which you've ever been a developer.
Yes. Yeah. I did not know that we shared this. I started
intro was
my dev career in email dev as well. I had no idea.
yeah. So, and it was like, I was not a developer. My official title was director of everything. And I was a creative studio. And I was
Ooh.
impatient because our developers were taking too long to like build these like Shopify templates. And I was like, email templates can't be that hard. I'll just do it myself. And like, then I did that. Yeah. I was like, why are these hard? These are hard.
They're so hard. No, I started, just interrupt with a little Kathryn backstory. I started, I have a design background. I went to school. I have an art degree. I did graphic design for a while. Yeah. And
conceptual art degree, not practical.
But I was working in agencies, and at the time things were trying to shift more and more digital, and the agencies were trying to do more and more emails and those like little listicle, pages and landing pages and promo stuff. And so I'm like, well, I've got a little bit of HTML and CSS just from like dabbling, I had a live journal. I was making custom MySpace templates. Like I knew my way around a little bit. And so I was like, I could do that, and it just kept being a situation where it would be something would be just a little bit more than I had done before. But I was like, I could do that. I can figure that out. And I ended up moving fully into like custom HTML email design and development. And that was where I started doing public speaking because I realized I wanted to go to these like email dev conferences and my company did not have the budget. It turns out if you're a speaker, they fly you out there, put you in a hotel, and you get to attend the rest of the conference for free.
I've never paid to go to a conference ever.
Right. So it kind of like, I say as a joke, like, yeah, I started speaking at conferences so I could sneak in for free. But genuinely, that was how it started. And then it was just like, oh, I actually just like this. This is fun.
I think it's really like we're all public speaking fans, right?
Yeah.
I was not to begin with. Like, so I got my degree in philosophy, and my professor for an independent study I did on culture and technology. Shock, which was about like the philosophy of video games. That was what I wanted to do, and he was really interested in it too. He was like, "You need to present this paper. Like it's a solid topic. Go present here. I'll help you get set up." And I got accepted, and I was sick because I bailed out. I was not prepared to give a speech about because I'd never done public speaking. I didn't do that in high school, like Erin. There was no like. I didn't have to take the course in college because, as it turns out, the philosophy course on logic replaced the core requirement that did the speech credit. It was great. I got to get out of it. But then like I did this random talk years and years ago, and like I realized if you prepare for it, it's not too bad. And then, doing that over and over and preparing for it led me to be able to do it unprepared relatively easily because you do it so much, you just know your own cadence. But like when I realized that like people liked what I was saying and I helped somebody and they came up to me after and they said, I never knew that. And you're like,
that feeling is
welcome.
Addictive when someone comes up to you in the hallway afterwards. I think that in retrospect, like that was what cemented it for me. There was a year I wanted to go speak at a conference. I didn't have anything like technical. I didn't have like a new technical discovery that I was ready to present. But I had this idea that was bouncing around about imposter syndrome and email development being kind of development, but kind of not being seen as that. I pitched that and I'm like, yeah, long shot, but okay. They ended up wanting to do that talk. And I was surprised and like, what? And giving that talk, people would come up to me afterwards and be like, yeah, I had no idea. Like I've struggled with this forever. And this is such like, it really hit home with me. And people would like tell me their whole life stories in the corridor. And I'd be like tearing up. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to do this forever. Like,
I had, oh, go ahead, Erin.
So I was going to say, if you're looking to get involved in speaking, one of the best things that I did that really leveled up my public speaking, and I actually got into it because actually Colin, we've known each other for years now, works at Orbit, and like we've worked together forever at a couple different places. But he organizes the Reno Ignite Talks, and I always helped him out in organizing. But if you haven't done an Ignite Talk and you're looking to improve your public speaking skills, do recommend, because they're all on like, I'm dropping the link in here. You can find one. They're all over the country, and they even do some virtually, but they're 5-minute PowerPoint talks on a topic. It can be any topic. They actually encourage you to not do one on professional things. Like they purposely are like, don't shill your stuff. I've given one on selfies. I've given one on 4 Eyes. I've given one on why Reno is the best city ever. And the slides rotate. So you get to design your own slides and they rotate every 20 seconds automatically, but you have to keep the pace, the cadence.
Yeah. So vaguely related to that, I'm going to move us on, transition us to the next topic, if that's okay.
We're gonna get back on topic with Erin and Bryan. That's so rare. Do it. Bring us back into the fold.
Bring it, circle us back.
So I wanted to talk a little bit. We've talked about kind of how we started out and how we got into it, but I wanted to try and focus on some actual like actionable tips, especially because so many of us kind of talked about that power of community and networking and kind of how that helped, especially as you guys were kind of bouncing back from this layoff. But for folks that are totally new, they might not have built that network yet. They might not have that community. What do they do, right? So if you don't have the public speaking background, you maybe don't have the connections to the network. Let's say you are, I'm going to pick one that I think is common. You're an individual contributor engineer, and you're thinking, DevRel looks fun. This doesn't look like a real job. I want to get paid to do that. So
first, DevRel is fun.
It is.
DevRel also sucks sometimes. It really does.
So much work.
It's great, but there's so much that goes. Anyway, I highly encourage you to look into it.
I was painting a what do you call it? What the user portrait?
No,
there's
user
a real
story.
word.
I don't know.
User story. You're telling us we're developing
I swear to God,
a
I
use
used to
case
do
here.
design. I swear to God, I'm a designer.
So there's I don't know how familiar everyone is with the front end world. I'm not going to make any assumptions, but there's an excellent podcast called The Shop Talk Show. Chris Coyer and Dave Rupert, both luminaries in the developer industry. But the whole like tagline to it, and I think it still is. I don't listen to podcasts, even though I run one, because again, you don't have to like the things that you do. But was like, just build websites. If you want to learn to be a web developer, what do? You just build websites. Like that's how you get good at it. It's the same with DevRel things, whether that's content creation, community building, documentation, any of these things, you get good at it by doing it. So there's a lot of ways to do that. If you really like a technology, whatever it is, Next.js, I'm an 11D stan. I adore 11D. So many different technologies out there that you might be good at.
I really appreciate the use of stan for 11D, not like a
I'm
K-pop
cool.
band.
Yep,
I'm really into it.
But yeah, like it's my favorite. Pick a technology and be a DevRel for it. Like that's so like write your first article about it. Create a 5-minute video about it. Craft a presentation about it. If it's open source, go into their issues and see if you can help somebody who's asking a question. Go into their Discord, see if you can help somebody that's asking a question. If you're really into it, go issue a pull request against their documentation repo. Like help make their documentation better because you love it and you're better at it, and you know that. Make your own blog, post your own stuff to your blog. Basically build a DevRel portfolio without having to do it for a company. I understand I'm coming from a place of extreme privilege, right? I've been able to do this for many reasons that, I mean, look at me. I've obviously been able to do it, right? Like the industry helped me out. But if you can, do these things. And if you can't, like, find a junior position. Having some small portfolio, even if it's one article somewhere, is going to help you immensely. Even if it's one, like a pull request is great because it's documentation that you improved somebody else's stuff. That's awesome. Also, you'll get feedback from good places. If you're standing for a framework and they give you bad feedback on your pull request, maybe don't stand for that framework anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, you learn by doing these things. You build a portfolio by doing these things. If you don't have a meetup in your town, I think you can probably start one nowadays. But like, if you don't have one, make one. Make friends with a staffing agency in town. A staffing agency for technology has a marketing budget for each of their recruiters, and each of their recruiters are happy to pay for the pizza at your meetup, even if there's only 10 people that come to it. Because that's 10 more people that they at least have their brand in front of. I spent 7 years with one sponsor for my meetup. They bought pizza and sandwiches every month. Perfect. That's all you need.
Yeah.
Anyway, lots of things.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's actually really great. I think the other thing to do is like, if you don't have that time and energy and, you know, all the privilege to like do a separate content, do what you've already done. And it's that like Jedi mind trick to kind of say like, you've got to document it anyway, because if you're looking for your next job, they're probably going to want to see the thing that you built no matter what anyway. So document what you've already done at the organization. And I think a big part of developer education or relations, or insert DevRel related title here, is showing that you can communicate what you know and then sharing that with others. So I think finding people who can lift you up and hype you up. TIL actually about the staffing agency trick. I used to run a creator meetup here in Brooklyn, New York. And the thing that I actually did is I actually went around to, I hosted it at breweries, and they were like, I was like, if I can bring in 5 people, will you give everybody their first beer free? Because you know that most people are going to buy more than 1 beer. And so I did that for sponsorships for events. I was just like, and actually have built up, you know, I do comedy on the side as an outlet. So built up enough of relations. I don't know if I should be like, I built up enough of a relationship with the local bar scene. Is that something you're excited to be proud about? But I never have to like worry about event things, because I know I'm like, I have built up this enough of time, and I frequented these places enough to know that I can get an event space, or I can do that there. But usually if you're in, again, I also acknowledge, and I want to publicly acknowledge the fact that like bars and breweries are harder places to have meetups, because not everybody drinks, and we should not hold the standard that everybody should drink. For my meetup specifically, I did actually have a beer component in it of beer tasting, because that was a nerdy Erin thing, and I wanted to nerd out about that for an hour. But I do think it's like important to acknowledge the privilege. And if you do not have the time, and guess what? A secret hack is many companies actually want your case study as blog content for their existing blog, and you can link to that from your personal site.
Also, like totally, like as you're doing it, if it's a company that's like VC funded and has money, they might pay you to do it. They might pay you a contractor fee. And like, I mean, at this point, like I don't really do anything for under like 500, but like $350, like for an article that you already know about, you can probably knock that out in a couple hours, and they might edit it for you too, and make it even better for you,
and promote it.
Absolutely. So yes, so I would also say there's a big component that Kathryn mentioned, what feels like forever ago, because that's how this works, that your content might not be good enough, because Kathryn mentioned imposter syndrome, right? And it's super important to mention this. My content is terrible every time I look at it. It's not to say that it actually is, right? I'm looking for a job. My content's amazing, everyone. Totally amazing. However, it's never going to be good enough for me. And if I waited for it to be good enough for me, I'd never put it out. Because an important thing with any sort of creative endeavor, because DevRel is a creative endeavor across the board, whether that's making an article, sending a newsletter, doing a tweet, whatever it is, it's a creative endeavor. The important thing is to learn taste. And you're going to learn taste well before you're good at anything. Your taste level is, again, like I mentioned earlier, right? I'm either going to be the next Wes Boss, or I'm going to hopefully find my way to do something else. I was never going to be Wes Boss. He makes millions of dollars on his courses. I'm not going to be that person. But my taste level was, I want to be that good. And I certainly wasn't. Far and away. I actually just took down my course website and published the course I had on there, because I didn't want to pay $30 a month anymore, on YouTube. And like, it's okay. It's okay. Like the content itself is good and the presentation's fine. But like, I published it, and it's live on YouTube, and you can go watch it right now. But like, your taste is going to accelerate, and you're always going to think you're not good enough. So put it out there, because someone's going to learn from it. I had my most visited blog post is about CSS before and after pseudo elements, which CSS was my first love. I knew CSS in and out. I'm not as good anymore because there's so much new cool stuff that I don't know. But I just assumed everyone knew this. You can use these things.
That is one of the biggest things when I talk to content creators, that almost always they will tell you one of their biggest hits, one of the like most popular pieces they've ever created, is something that at first they thought was too basic, or was too obvious or was whatever. But yeah, no, there is literally nothing that is too basic, because people will always be starting out in this industry, and everyone learns in different ways, right? So some people might really click with video courses. Some people like those micro videos that are like 5 minutes a piece. Some people like the ones that are 30 minutes. Some people like blogs that are written like a novel. Some people like listicle style, like step by step. Even if that content exists, it might not exist in a way that's resonating with somebody looking for that content. So even if you are putting out something that you think has been done a million times, your voice, your tone, and the approach that you take is going to differentiate it. You might as well put it out there.
I'm gonna be slimy for a second. Like, in terms of growth hacking, like if you want to growth hack your portfolio around this, right?
Slimy.
Think about putting out valuable content. That's most important, right? But talking about these like basic things, these things that you think are too basic to write about,
huge.
Either people haven't written about them because everyone thought that, or if they did write about it, it's older content now because they wrote about it forever ago, which means that even though like SEO wise, they've got like domain authority, et cetera, Google's always looking for new content, because new content theoretically is better content in most of these marketplaces. So if you put out new and updated content about something that the other content on the first page of Google is 5 years old, and it's good and helpful information, and you have everything done properly on it, you might rank high. Like I'm on like spot number 2 for CSS after, I think, or spot number, I don't know. I don't pay attention anymore, but like I had to for a little bit. And it's because who's writing articles about this? Everyone knows how to
be right back. I'm going to start my CSS content thing just to run over. Just kidding.
I'm launching a new website right now.
Launching a new website tomorrow. Just kidding. But I think there is a really good point to that. And I think if you are new to this space, you actually have a secret advantage.
Yes.
Because you recently Googled that stuff. You recently Googled it, and you know how crap the existing content out there can be. Like there are times, like I was looking up YAML the other day because I was writing GitHub Actions, and like I'm not super proficient at GitHub Actions. I think GitHub Actions can be a little wonky at times.
Oh, they're super wonky.
They're super wonky. And I was like, is it an Erin error? Did I write this wrong? Is it a YAML error? Is it this thing was updated? I don't know. And I actually have a draft post now about GitHub Actions, because I was like, oh, it was the 3 blog posts that I referenced all told me A, and it is actually B, and all those. And then I emailed all those companies, and I was like, hey, just wanted to let you know that your blog post is out of date. By the way, are you hiring? Here's my resume. Bye. Like, look at me finding spots in your docs. So
I'm helping. Yeah.
It's like, I was like, look at me, I'm already helping. And so that's a great little hack there. But the other thing that I think I've learned from is there's also not too basic, but there's also, you are a person and you are of a personality, and be very personable with it. You know, I always, as I got into comedy 1.5 years ago, actually totally on an accident. I'm a very say yes and figure it out later type of person when it comes to my side hobbies and projects. And the first thing they make you do in a comedy class is they make you write a 10-minute comedy set, stand up, and then you have to fail on a stage, on lights, in front of people. And it is miserable. That 10 minutes feels like an hour. It is absolutely horrible. You're sitting there and you're like, please, and they make you stand up there the full 10 minutes, even if you have no material, which I ran out of material. So I was just like, and it's awkward. And the thing is like, that was the best thing for me to get over any awkward experience, any mishap. And there's also the other thing, and the concept of perfect versus done. And I think as a developer relationship, wow, we're adding new titles now. Developer relations individual, or any individual making content, you have to understand, when does something need to be absolutely perfect? Like, probably double check those. Like if you're adding any code snippets, probably double check those. But what needs to just get shipped, and how do those need to differ?
I like that. And see, I can do comedy too.
Yes, and.
But
improv,
you will inevitably publish something that's wrong, and that's okay too. Like, it's not great, but you can fix it. This is the internet. It hasn't been carved into stone. You can update it, and you can own it that you are a human who makes
I have
errors.
a story around this, and I
Please.
still don't. I hate it. I hate it. So during my free agency, when I was like really like working on being the next West Boss, like I was like, okay, I'm making some good like YouTube tutorials, and they're fine. I want to try like short form stuff, and this is before the short form stuff that I'm working on right now. But I wanted to do CSS shorts. I wanted to do like make it a specific style. I really like the oh no, I've lost the name of it. There's a YouTube channel that does like video game content. And it's all about like video game theory and like how to make like good games and stuff like that. But I liked their style. They had like not animated, just like still drawings and stuff like that. But I wanted to kind of emulate that. And I made one and it did pretty good. And so I made another one, and it had very good early engagement. And if you are a nerd like me, you know, on YouTube, the early engagement teaches the search algorithm on YouTube, and good engagement early means good long-term search growth on. I'm not this sleazy, I promise. But knowing these things is actually kind of important, but that's fine. But the way I described something, and it was about the box model and some other stuff with Flex and stuff like that. It was the video was right. The audio, the way I said certain things led to a wrong outcome, led to the information about the box model being wrong. And my like 5th or 6th comment pointed it out to me. And I was heartbroken because I don't want to spread any sort of bad information. Like, absolutely not. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here for education. But the other part of the heartbreak was YouTube has no way of editing a video, right? There are problems if you were to be able to do that. You get like tons of comments and then you change it to something malicious, and that's no good.
Yeah.
But I had to remove the video, and I published a new version of it, and I tweeted all about it, and I talked about the mistake, and I did all these things. It got like no engagement, and it's a great little video, and I like it a lot. And I lost steam on that initiative just because like I it was crushing. Like, this thing that got great engagement, I had to kill from my channel and replace it with this thing that was exactly the same but correct and didn't. But like, that being said, it's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And honestly, owning up to it and like talking about that shows a lot of what we might call culture fit at lots of companies, right? Like being able to show that when you make a mistake, you own up to it is huge. Like, that's fine. There's ways to fix it, and let's fix it. And it might not perform as well because you had to fix it that way, but like, I won't do that again with the box model. Maybe I'll do it with something else, but I double check all my stuff, right?
Right. But yeah, no, mistakes just happen, and that's part of being a human. I always try to think of it like, especially for me, I was so nervous at the idea of live coding, right? And like, when I started in DevRel, I was like, but something that helped me was remembering doing like pairing sessions with more senior engineers and stuff, how relieved I felt when they had to Google things or when they got errors. It made me feel like, oh, okay, it's not just me. Like, I am not just terrible at this. This happens to everyone. So I try to keep that in mind when things go wrong with me, that maybe I can be, maybe my effing up can be reassuring to someone else that this is just part of the job. It's just engineering.
I distinctly, if you have edited any of my first draft of content, thanks, Bryan. You're the best. Wonderful.
Too many hyphens, Erin. Too many M dashes.
My abuse of M dash is very real.
M dash.
And we will add them everywhere. And then if you are my husband editing it, he goes, you write like you talk, meaning lots of tangents. And I am very fortunately measured. I am very, very fortunately married to an editor. It's helped my personal content creation so much. But I distinctly remember kind of going back, and if Bryan is going to share an embarrassing story, I will share mine. A company I had worked for actually publicly imploded on the internet. I lost my job via Twitter. It was actually very traumatic. It was picked up in a couple of tech publications. It was actually terrible. Don't recommend. But the community at the time, I was actually offline. And so I was away from my computer, logged out of Slack, logged out of Discord, logged out of everything. I was actually getting married 3 days later. It was a great story. So, and just had my appendix out. So it was like one of those, like, just TLDR, very shitty week. And the community had sort of like exploded and been like, what the heck, this software, is it available? And I'm like, you're right. I just lost my job and I don't know, but I was the admin on the Discord. And I had to go in and be like, hey, y'all, I'm actually on vacation right now. Things are happening. And I went to go post our, context, like our, code of conduct, like just a friendly reminder. Here you go. Also, can someone else handle this? Because like I am on vacation and also now need to process, and like my therapist is now on speed dial and where is a very strong drink or something when I need it, and like a chocolate cake, because like this is just where we're at today. And I posted the code of conduct and had 4 typos in like a 140 word post on Twitter. And then all these people were simultaneously trolling me and be like, wow, this company sucks so bad. They can't even post their own code of conduct tweet right. And I'm like, I have no comment. And I'm like, then my terrible brain is like, I'm just going to double down on it. And I'm like, you're right. I actually just lost my job and everything. And I've been yelled at on the internet for
anymore. Yeah.
I was like, I don't even work here anymore. So like, fight me. And then they're like, oh. But yeah, TLDR, that was a stressful day, but I definitely, and there's still people out there that will dig up that tweet, and like, there's still a few haters that I haven't had a, they're like, and I'm like, this was literally like, this is now like 3.5 years ago.
Internet hate is forever, I suppose.
And they're just like, I am going to remember you about this moment, and this is like what I have. And I'm like,
that's unhinged.
Yeah, no, that's like, now at this point, if you bring it up to me, I'm just like, and you show me that tweet, I will block you. Also, I'll laugh at myself for it. But yeah.
You can ask me and Erin plenty of questions like at social media stuff right here.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, everyone's handles, they're in the box. And your questions don't have to be about DevRel even.
Absolutely.
Ask us anything. This is your chance.
If you make something that you're super proud of, I fell into my Twitter audience, so I'm happy to like promote that as well. So if you make something and you like need someone to hype you up, I am here for you. I love being a hype woman. So like, let's go.
You are an excellent hype woman.
Yeah, true story.
Thank you. But yeah, let me hype you up.
Also, as it turns out, getting laid off in DevRel is a great way of getting followers. Who knew?
Actually, weird. Yes. Yeah. A great way of getting followers. It's
not not a great way, but it works.
It works.
Oh, way.
And I have interesting feelings about that. And so, yeah.
Again, follower count less important than the engagement that you have with the following. But it was still interesting to see.
That is weird.
And you have a cool job offer, then hit Bryan and I up, because we do banter together. This is like my shameless self-promotion.
Yeah. The sign.